Chapter 9. The King of Clubs. Angel had been doing research. Angel researched everything, compulsively and thoroughly, in the way of someone who has learned that information is the only currency that reliably holds its value. What was unusual was the conclusions he had reached. He texted Catherine and Susie via the Camarilla phones with the urgent brevity of someone who believes he has discovered something important. They met in Catherine's apartment. Chartrey knows more than she's telling us, Angel said, before either of them had sat down. I think she was behind the abduction attempt in the alley. I think the ghouls were working for her. Catherine looked at him for a moment with the expression of someone watching a car drive confidently in the wrong direction. She said nothing. Benton's letter said the ghouls may have been connected to a vampire fighting ring. The scientists are still analyzing them, and a couple from the office bar, but the point is, Chartrey, Angel, Catherine said. Chaudhry had access to the information about our presentation route. She knew we'd be in that alley, and if you think about the timing, Angel, he stopped. Chaudhry called a meeting, Catherine said. You can ask her your questions. Try not to embarrass yourself. Susie, who had been watching this exchange with the careful neutrality of someone who had decided not to pick a side, said nothing. She had her own thoughts about Chartrey, and she kept them to herself. They met in the Scientology Center sanctuary. Angel wasted no time. Why didn't you prevent the ghoul from committing suicide? You had her in custody. Chartrey found his accusation odd. I couldn't have prevented it, she said. I would have thought your sire would have covered the basics of how a blood bond functions. A blood-bound ghoul will choose death over betraying their master. That is not a gap in my security. That is simply what a blood bond is. But if you had known... I'm going to stop you there. Chartrey's voice dominated. You are a neonate of perhaps 3 months. I have been navigating Camarilla politics since before your sire's sire was born. If you press this line of questioning any further, I will demonstrate the power differential between us. Her gaze left him cowering. Are we clear? Angel decided they were clear. Catherine snickered silently and pretended to look at her nails. Susie shrank a little in her chair. Chartrey moved on to her agenda. The 3 of you will go to the King of Clubs tonight. Front door, pass as human, make connections, ask around. We need information, and we need allies. Build rapport with whoever seems worth building it with. She paused. That is all. They prepared with the particular care of people who are trying to look like something they aren't. Catherine and Susie flushed warmth into their skin and remembered to breathe. Angel consulted his reflection and arranged his obfuscated features into something that read in low light as approximately human. Shadowy and indistinct, but human enough. You look like a special effect, Susie told him. I look like a person, Angel said. You look like a person in a fog. That's what I'm going for. They went in through the front door. The main floor of the King of Clubs was everything the VIP level was not. Loud, crowded, and pulsing. The goths danced frenetically. The posers were posturing. The blood dolls were openly hopeful. Susie looked around. The auras and smells hit her all at once. Layered, contradictory, impossible to distinguish. Human mostly, but with variations she couldn't characterize. She had the feeling of someone trying to read a book in a language they didn't know. Don't try to sort it all, Catherine said quietly beside her. Just notice what stands out. What stood out first was a man in a top hat and brass goggles, wearing a lab coat covered in what appeared to be deliberately applied scorch marks. He was holding a drink that glowed faintly blue and explaining something at length to no one in particular. Steampunk scientist, Susie said. Apparently, said Catherine. They approached. His name was Chris, and he was delighted to meet them. He was also, he wanted them to know, a vampire. A real one? Susie asked with precisely the right amount of enthusiasm. A real one, Chris confirmed, and launched into an account of his vampiric nature that was detailed and almost entirely wrong. He fed on psychic energy, he explained. He could sense auras. He had died once, technically, in a metaphorical sense. He had very sensitive teeth. Catherine half listened while scanning the room for someone more interesting. Angel, who had been hovering at the edge of the conversation, leaned in and said something in a conspiratorial tone. Chris blinked at him, reassessed the entire interaction, and began edging away. Within 2 minutes, he had found somewhere else to be. Psychic vampire, Catherine chuckled. For real, said Susie. They moved on. The two women they approached next were impossible to miss. Elaborate headdresses, dramatic makeup, and burlesque dance moves. The blonde introduced herself as Sarah. The brunette was Esperanza. They focused on Catherine and Susie with the intensity of people who have found exactly what they're looking for. Catherine and Susie turned on their charm. Sarah and Esperanza were smitten. They leaned in, they laughed, they touched arms. Angel materialized at Susie's elbow and attempted to insert himself in the conversation. Sarah looked at him. Esperanza looked at him. Something in the atmosphere of the interaction curdled. Focus on me, Catherine said to the women seductively. They focused on Catherine. It emerged over the next several minutes that Sarah and Esperanza were enthusiastic participants in what they called blood sports. They offered their veins with the cheerful generosity of people bringing a bottle of wine to a dinner party. Both Catherine and Susie declined graciously. After walking away, Susie said, They've both fed vampires recently, and they're both, she paused and whispered, they're both menstruating. Mark was in a bow tie. His companion, Amanda, was considerably younger and looked it. They were warm, sociable, and communicated in the pleasant shorthand of people accustomed to navigating social situations that require discretion. The swinging was implied rather than stated, as was a broader openness to arrangements of various kinds. Amanda became enthralled with Catherine in approximately 90 seconds. There's this place, Amanda confided, leaning in with the warmth of someone sharing a very good secret. A day spa, very exclusive. They have this elixir. I know how that sounds, but I swear it's better than Botox, better than anything. I look exactly the same as I did 10 years ago. She touched her own face with genuine wonder. I'll tell you more about it. Here, she produced her phone. Give me your number. Catherine gave her number to Amanda. They hugged goodbye. Interesting, Catherine said when they were out of earshot. Jean was short, tough, and standing alone, smoking a clove cigarette. She was a woman who knew things and knew exactly whom to trust with them. Angel approached her directly, which was the wrong approach. Jean looked at him with the flat assessment of someone who has encountered his type before and has no time for it. No, she said simply and turned away. Angel said something that could charitably be described as a taunt. Jean's expression didn't change. Back off. Catherine stepped forward. Ignore him, she said. We all do. Jean held up a finger and answered a call on her cell phone, handled whatever it was with brisk efficiency, and then turned back to Catherine. I can get things done, she said. I don't discuss specifics here. She and Catherine exchanged numbers, and Jean turned and made her way into the crowd. She's useful, Catherine said. She hates me, Angel said. No, she doesn't, Catherine assured him. She doesn't care enough to hate you. The woman asking about Lucian was small and lost looking, circling the room with the distracted energy of someone who has misplaced something important. She had been upstairs with him twice. She told anyone who would listen. He had stopped returning her calls. He had moved on to someone French, and she simply could not understand why, and she could not eat, and she could not sleep. Susie caught Catherine's eye, and they moved away together. That's a blood bond, Catherine said quietly, once they were out of earshot. I know, said Susie. She was quiet for a moment. She said he moved on to someone French. Yes. If Lucian has a French companion, Susie started again. If Lucian is keeping a French ghoul, if that French ghoul is Henri, could Lucian really be Hunter? Is that what you're thinking? Catherine asked, knowing the possibility would sting. Susie said nothing. The implication did sting. We don't know that, she said finally. No, Catherine agreed. We don't. They left it there. The last couple they approached seemed like someone who would be at the club, but there was something off about them. She had pink hair and the slightly elevated energy of someone running on something interesting. He was long-haired, dressed in black, twitchy and watchful. Angel introduced himself with his customary lack of social grace, and they looked at him with unified displeasure. Catherine and Susie repositioned themselves smoothly, and the conversation found its footing. The pink-haired woman, who did not offer her name but accepted theirs, spoke with the enthusiasm of someone describing a hobby she is passionate about. There were fights, she explained, real ones. There was a venue. There was a drink they served, something that gave you an edge, made you feel strong and fast and extraordinary. She would say no more about it here. Catherine turned on her charm and moved closer to the woman, who felt the connection and gave Catherine her number before they left. They left the club an hour before dawn. Angel made his way through the tunnels, mulling over the Chartrey problem in his mind. Susie went to the moorage, wanting to know yet afraid to know if Hunter had other women in his life. Catherine wandered around before heading home and did not feed. She barely made it back before sunrise.